Oh,
Okay, now I think I've got everything. Can you see the screen?
I can.
Did you say you can or you cannot?
I can.
Okay,
Everything is copacetic.
perfect.
Now we'll ask everybody to go on mute.
We still have 3 minutes. There was somebody who was listed as Carol, and I believe it was one of our board members. Ah, it's Skylar.
Got it.
Perfect.
that was
Thank
on.
you. If you came in through Carol's link, you will have her name, so you need to rename yourself.
Well, we've got a few minutes. So we'll let people, maybe we'll get started 2 minutes later, so we'll let people trickle in.
All right. And I have control over the slideshow today because we have such a big group. Carol and Tara are going to be on gatekeeping and
Great. And when it
housekeeping.
comes to the questions, when the audience can answer questions, I will let them know at the start that we're going to ask them to send their questions in via chat.
Okay. Great. Hi, Denise.
Hello.
All right, I'll just start with some announcements. We are recording this meeting because there are people who can't attend and would like to listen to the speaker or see what we're up to offline. So thank you for agreeing with that. Please mute yourself if you are not speaking, and unmute yourself if you are speaking. And I think we do have most of our board members.
Dee Dee, maybe we'll give it another minute or so. We'll let people trickle in.
Okay.
And
And
some might,
I believe that my sharing was interrupted.
Chris Wilson, I think, indicated he's not going to attend.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
maybe we can get started with a roll call. Dee Dee, call the meeting to order.
Yeah, let me hang on 1 second because I had the content up and then I got kicked off for some reason. Can you see this?
I see you, but no content.
Okay.
Success. Content.
There, it's there, was there.
Great. Thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. This is the monthly meeting of the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council. And we gathered once a month to find out what the council's been up to over the previous month. This is just our housekeeping meeting. The actual work happens every day by our talented staff. So we do have a lot of people here today that normally don't attend our meetings. And I just wanted to welcome all the new visitors. And then we will start in with some just our regular monthly meeting stuff with our consent agenda. We don't have any big actions that we have to take, and then we'll get right into our presenter for the day. So with that, could you do roll call, please? Rick Parfit, Secretary.
Yes, thank you. Dee Dee Smolin,
Here.
Chris Wilson.
Chris is not here.
I don't, yes, I just want to confirm. Rob Rennie,
Here.
Rob, you, okay. James Wolbrink. James, you there? Okay, we'll come back. Jared Lewis,
Here.
Derek Neumann. I'm gonna come back to Derek too. Kevin Kynett,
He's in the meeting and can be here for votes, but he won't be joining unless there's a
Okay.
vote.
Harold Schoppenhelm,
Present.
Rick Parfit, present. And then I'm gonna go back to James Wolbrink. Nothing. And then Derek Neumann. All right, so we have 4 people missing.
Is a quorum established?
Yes.
Yes, 6 out of 10.
Thank you.
I'm gonna mute.
Okay, this is our agenda for today. And like I said, we've got some just housekeeping things to do before we get into our speaker, which is what everybody wants to hear. But if you do have time after the speaker, we are having reports from our staff about the projects that we're working on. So I encourage you to spend an extra 10 minutes of your day to stay with us and hear those reports from our staff members. But first, we have a consent calendar. We have our meeting minutes and ratifying our email board vote of September, which included our tax return and our minutes. So I just need one motion and a second from our board to approve the consent calendar.
This is Jared. I move to approve the consent calendar.
Could I have a second?
This is Rick Parfit, and I second that motion.
Thank you, Rick. Could you do a roll call vote, please?
Yes. Dee Dee Smolin,
Yes.
Chris Wilson's absent. Rob Rennie? Rob?
Yes, for Rob.
Okay. James Wolbrink, and he's not, unless he's not present. Jared Lewis,
Aye.
Derek Neumann. Noted before not present. Kevin Kanyet. Noted before not present. Harold Schoppenhauman
Aye.
and Rick Parfit, aye. So
Great.
5 ayes.
Thanks so much. I appreciate that. Sorry for the housekeeping stuff, but that's with every board meeting, I think. And then we go right into our financial report from Chris Summerfield, our CFO. Do you want to take the screen?
Got it. Thank you, Dee Dee. So this is obviously an end of a quarter. So this is year to date, September 25, which is the end of Q3. Since we've finished up the tax return, and the audit work has already started on the 2026 financial plan, better known as the budget. And we just started that up last week. So we're working on that, hoping to get something, a draft a couple scenarios to the board before Thanksgiving, so we can try to finalize that ultimately by the January 26th board meeting. So that's what we're going to be focusing on, at least mostly in the accounting and finance area. Next, just a couple things, just to highlight some metrics. AR days outstanding remain healthy and good. Cash balance is good. Monthly vendor balance, we pay our bills timely, and that's why it's been coming down. And then the average monthly payroll has been steady, although we have a couple new hires, which is a good thing because that means more people working, which means we can charge more revenue and more expense. So, and of course, with the AR, again, we received the Palo Alto already, so, and a couple of these other ones. So again, the AR remains healthy, nothing really old or outstanding that's late. Some unrestricted cash, sustainability account remains healthy. While we can notice, we talked about this before, restricted cash comes down because we get these big advances for some of our large grants, and that's why you see it will go up as we start using that those funds. The restricted cash starts coming down. Soon we'll be getting a couple more advances, so then in the next couple months you'll start seeing that restricted cash going back up. Just looking at some of the financials, typically financials comprise of the balance sheet, the P&L, which is the profit and loss, and then the cash flow. Balance sheet is healthy compared to the plan. No surprises there. P&L, we're on track for roughly at least $6+ million for the year, which is pretty much right there as we projected a year ago. And of course, cash flow statement is basically just taking the accrual amounts and showing where the cash actually comes from and putting it in a cash format. This is just kind of a detailed kind of what we spend, our cash balances. As you see, we start when a big advance comes in, cash balance goes up, and then we start using those funds up, and then it kind of repeats that process over again. Restricted funds report, again, as I mentioned before, it's healthy and it's steady month over month over the last year. So right there, right on track for what we had forecasted a year ago. And that just represent a chart representing that account, sustainability account balance. And go ahead.
Chris, I don't think we're seeing your report, just so you know.
Oh,
Edie, maybe
What
you
are you
can advance,
seeing?
maybe you can advance the slides.
I
What are
don't,
you
they're not
seeing?
in the packet, so.
why are you not seeing that?
So
What do you-
I am seeing him, and I had to click share to see his screen.
Okay, all right. If everybody's seeing them except for me, that's fine.
I might be the only one. Everybody might have to do that because of the way I logged in. I don't know. This is unusual.
I can see
I can
them
also see them.
Okay.
Oh, everybody
it's
else can
just-
see him. Okay, good, good.
All
good.
right. Never mind, it's
good.
just me.
Never mind.
And I've seen them, so.
Yeah. And then the last slide I just want to share is typically at the end of each quarter, we'll show a budget versus actual. And typically, like I mentioned before throughout the presentation, we're pretty much right there. We're above revenue, above plan, because we've been, obviously we've had good weather, no real, acts of God that have stopped us from doing work outside. And payroll expenses, a little bit, we've kind of projected a little bit higher. We had planned to maybe hire somebody here and there, but we're below payroll expenses. HFR contractors are up, but that's a good thing because the more HFR contractor expense we have, the more revenue goes up. Professional services, we're definitely below that, what we had projected, and thus net income is quite a bit higher than what we projected. So, and the sustainability account is right there. As you can see, we projected about 445,000 and we're right at 439. So I just want to say great job to everybody in the staff for, hitting your numbers. And so far, everything's looking good. Any questions at this time?
Chris,
Yes, sir.
I just wanted to say, I want to thank both you and Annalise and the team. I think this will be our second consecutive year of exceeding 6 million in revenue. And we're on track to end the year pretty strong. We expect a good amount of revenue to trickle in between now and 12/31. So I just want to thank you for your work and thank the team for their diligence in making sure that we stay on track. Appreciate it.
Yeah, quite welcome. And if there's no other questions, I just always remember only you can prevent fires. So please give your tax deductible donations often and generously to the council. Back to you, Dee Dee.
Great. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate everything. So for board report, I wanted to invite everybody to consider whether or not there's a place for them here at the Fire Safe Council. We have initiated term limits, and some of our longtime, very important board members will be terming out in coming years. So we're trying to bring on new people. It doesn't require you to come from a fire background. It just requires you to be committed to our mission, which is to promote wildfire safety in Santa Clara County. And so please, if you do, if this does interest you, please do email me or Seth and or any other Fire Safe Council person that you know, or give us a call too. I also wanted to say that I'm attending the Red Sky Summit on November 4th, and then we are also doing one of the tours, which is great. And this summit is it's relatively new, but it's an important event that gathers different technologies and different practitioners in the wildfire safety sphere, and it's in San Francisco. But then they reach out, and it's great this year that the Fire Safe Council will be represented in their tours, and you'll hear more about that later. So that's it. Again, I encourage you to stay after the speaker and just listen to what we're doing. We're happy to have you all here. I do want to recognize some notable attendees. We have Bilal Aftab from the mayor of Saratoga. We also have Tina Walia, who's a Saratoga City Council member, former mayor. There are representatives from Sam Liccardo's office, Jim Bell from Valley Water, who was our former senator, is also on, as well as staff from Gail Pellerin's office. And if there's anybody that I forgot, just message me and let me know, and I'll make sure you get an announcement. So that's it from me, and I'm going to turn it over to Seth for his board report, for his CEO report.
Thank you very much, Dee. Appreciate that. When we discussed this meeting, we wanted to allow as much time for Michael Goldner, our guest presenter, as possible. So I'm not going to give my full report. I'm just going to hit on a couple of highlights. The board members, of course, have the full report and have read them diligently over the weekend in preparation for the meeting. So I thank you in advance for that. Just a couple of key highlights for me. Since last board meeting, we've brought in an additional $622,000 in new revenue. 400,000 of that comes from our Coastal Conservancy grant to start up the South Bay Prescribed Burn Association. We are bringing prescribed fire into our practice, into our forest health practice, as one of our core treatment regimes for forest health engagement and wildfire risk reduction. And then we just were notified the other day that we have been awarded a $222,000 grant from the California Fire Safe Council. It is a joint grant. We are going to be doing a project in concert with the San Mateo Fire Safe Council and Denise Enya, my counterpart. She's the ED of the Santa Clara Fire Safe Council. And we're going to jointly do 6.2 miles of Los Trancos Road. So this will be a project that goes through District 16, crossing both Santa Clara and San Mateo counties. It'll include vegetation management, reduction, roadside vegetation reduction, and a Firewise community development. So that is new revenue that's coming in, and we're grateful for that. I just wanted to also thank Margaret Abe-Koba, District 5 representative. She's at the, of course, Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors meeting today, but I was invited to participate and did participate in the Stanford University Wildfire Summit back on September 29th. I was a panelist. It was a great discussion, and there is information available. We could drop into the chat on that meeting. Dee Dee mentioned the Red Sky Summit. We were invited this year to showcase our 2,000-acre forest health grant project with BurnBot, one of our vendors. Pleased to say that that actually is sold out. If you're not registered for Red Sky and you're not selected as one of the participants in that tour, unfortunately, it will be no longer available, but we will be filming it. We've got 2 film crews, and it's something that I hope that we can be releasing perhaps sometime early in the new year. In terms of other focuses, I just want to highlight one of the challenges that we are experiencing, and I know that Chris had mentioned that our AR and our AP is good, but we are experiencing some delays from our U.S. Fire Service grants. We don't do a lot of work because the county doesn't have a lot of U.S. Forest Service land, but we do have some pass-through grants. And some of those challenges are the projects that we have funded, we have yet to either receive advances or payments. So in some cases, I'll make decisions with the team and we'll have to delay start of those grant opportunities until we receive the payments. But this is not a significant portion of our overall book. Priorities for me over the coming next few weeks. One is to work with District 16 and their staff and Congressman Liccardo to help further progress on the Wildfire Resilience Initiative that he's looking to do. And of course, the core priority internally is to get the first draft of our 2026 budget to the board just before Thanksgiving. We're making good progress on that, and the team and I meet regularly, at least once a week, and of course have individual conversations. So that is the end of my abridged broad report. I will entertain any questions from the board members or audience if there are any.
Does anyone have any questions for Seth?
Hearing none and seeing none, my board report is complete.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Seth. And sorry, Chief Ori said he had a verbal report, so I have a slide here for him. Is Chief?
Yeah.
Perfect.
Hi, I'll try to be quick. Last week we had planned to do some prescribed burning at Grant Ranch and then do a S234 class, which is a intermediate firing operations class. Both had to be canceled because of the weather pattern. This coming Saturday, we're planning to do a cultural burn up in Contra Costa County at Cal State East Bay campus. But the weather looks kind of iffy on that. That's about a 1 acre burn. So we'll see. Play it by weather, play it by ear. You're probably all happy with this weather pattern, but it is interfering with some prescribed burn plans. Regarding the wildfire prevention grant applications that were submitted last August, those are still under review. And Chief Berlant wants to try to make an announcement before the end of the year. So one big development with that is the Prop 4 monies was just pulled out of this particular program or this particular solicitation. And we will issue a whole new solicitation before the end of the year. So those monies will be kept separate. Normally, we just use the CCI funding source. Last week, we also had a cone collection effort out at Mount Madonna County Park, and we were able to collect 16.5 bushels of coast redwood cones from the 1,500 to 2,000 foot elevation. And that's all seed zone 097, which is the same area as the CZU lightning complex. So some of that seed could end up going to reforestation projects throughout the Santa Cruz Mountains. And I think that is it for me.
Are there any questions for Chief Orr? I had one question. The Prop 4 funding, is that going to pull from the same group of applicants, or are you going to do a whole new solicitation for that?
It'll be a whole new solicitation.
Okay.
Yeah, initially we were going to go through and award the CCI funds that were available and then go into the Prop 4, but there's been some changes in the criteria
Okay.
from our standpoint, so it'll be
Great.
separate. So it'll be kind of like the lotto, have a second chance winners.
Okay, great. Thanks, Chief. Skylar Thornton from Santa Clara County Fire.
Good afternoon, everybody. We currently have our 12-member crew out working on a couple of different projects. One on county parks land in cooperation with Fire Safe Council and the other on Mid-Penn Open Space Authority land. Both are clearing brush and prepping for some pile burning this year in advance of hopefully some larger broadcast burns next year. And then moving on, County Fire has an academy going on currently with throughout the department about 50 probationary members in various stages of their 18-month probation. We're currently working through more community risk assessments in cooperation with our partners at the Fire Safe Council as well as Los Altos Hills County Fire District. I expect a couple of more of those to come in later this fall and try to get those pushed through so we can get more communities on their way to becoming FireWise recognized. And along with the Fire Safe Council, we participated in a couple of events, wildfire resilience related topics for both Stanford and Representative Liccardo, and then our community education and risk reduction group will graduate about 20 CERT people who are trained up in community emergency response teams throughout the West Side, Saratoga, Cupertino, Los Gatos areas. Unless there are any questions, that's the end of my report.
Thanks, Skylar. Any questions? All right, hearing none. We do have a few minutes. Otherwise, I'll put this after the speaker. I know that we have Los Altos Hills County Fire District here, and I don't know if we have anybody from San Jose or any of the others. But Los Altos Hills, do you have a report?
Yeah, let me have Eugenia go first and then Denise will go second. Thanks.
Okay.
Hey, great. Thanks for organizing that. Snap. We have our Robletta Burke evacuation route maintenance project going to be on the ground November 3rd on Monday. And we have our first Flashy Fuels project in the planning cycle. You may have recall from at least 3 or 4 months ago, we introduced a Flashy Fuels pilot program. And what that does is it revisits the evacuation routes that we've done through the past 2 years in case we've had a lot of grass regrowth, especially since we had such a wet spring and early summer. So we analyze those every month. And this month we reached the threshold to go ahead and go take care of some dry grass. And of course, now you guys started raining, but that's okay. So we're happy to say the pilot program is doing its job. And I will pass the baton to Denise.
Thanks. So I'll cover the community education risk reduction. We've had several events we've attended through the town of Los Altos and Los Altos Hills, Vines and Wines, Oktoberfest. Again, our biggest pushes for the Los Altos Hills residents are our FireWise programs, of which we have 8 recognized communities and 3 that are ready to turn in applications. And also our HIZ home ignition zone assessments, which we are partnered with the Fire Safe Council on. Thank you. So those are the 2 big components on a local level, and then on a county level, really pushing Alert SCC. So if anyone lives in Santa Clara County, isn't signed up for Alert SCC, please do so for early emergency notifications. I guess the only other thing of big note would be we completed the application and submitted for the Board of Forestry for the risk reduction community list, our fire risk reduction community list back, it was due October 1st, it closed. We submitted 83 documents along with a cover page and the application to get on their list that will be approved or accepted in July of next year. It's a 2-year list. And we applied as a non-city or county. So I think that's about our biggest updates. Thanks a lot.
Great. Fantastic. I think we're gonna punt the rest of the districts to after our speaker because we're getting close to that time. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen so that our speaker can share theirs, and I'm going to turn it over to Seth, our CEO, who's going to give an introduction to the speaker.
Thank you, Dee Dee. I appreciate it. For those that don't come regularly to our board meetings, almost every month I bring in a guest speaker on a variety of topics across the wildfire ecosystem. And we do that about 10 months out of the year. We don't have a board meeting in December, but we do have a board meeting next month. And before we get going with Michael, I just want to let everybody know that next month, our board speaker will be in person at our office at the fire station, not over Zoom. And I'm glad to say that Kate Wilkin, who is an assistant or associate professor at San Jose State University, a great friend of the Fire Safe Council, and she will be presenting on her recent research that she did on high fire hazard wildland urban interface residences in California, specifically the lack of voluntary and mandated wildfire risk assessments in home ignition zones. And so this really ties pretty closely with the presentation we're doing today. For those of you that subscribe to the Mercury News yesterday and the day before, Paul Rogers, the great environmental columnist, he wrote an article, an interview with Kate on her research. And as it just happens, she's been teed up for about a month and a half already to be our guest speaker. So look forward to seeing more people come and meet us in person next month. Without further ado, let me just start off by giving a brief introduction. I'm excited to have Michael Loma here today. I've known Michael for a while, and I've known of his work longer than I've known him. In fact, when I got into the world of wildfire 5 years ago or so, his research, among others, was some that I really took to heart and studied. I will say, if you like to play with fire in the research lab, there's probably no better place than where Michael hangs his hat. But in any event, Michael, during his day job, is the associate professor and director of the Berkeley Fire Lab at University of Berkeley, UC Berkeley. Go Bears. We're very pleased that he was able to join us today. He put out a study, he and his other research partners put out a study, a couple of months back now, called Fire Risk to Structures in California's Wildland Urban Interface. And I will say that this study is getting a lot of play. It's getting a lot of interest because, in my opinion, it's well evidenced, but offers practical recommendations that people can do at the home, but more importantly, at the community level to really reduce wildfire risk. And so I'm really grateful that you've made time to join us today. And without further ado, Michael, the floor is yours. And let me just say to the audience, we are going to take questions, but we ask that you submit your questions via the chat. And I will collect your questions. We only have 10 to 15 minutes of Q&A. We might not be able to get to every question, but please submit your questions via chat, and please keep yourself muted during the presentation. Thank you. And Michael, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Seth, and thank you all for being here. It's a pleasure to present to you. Seth mentioned I'm going to be presenting today on a paper that we recently published. It was in Nature Communications. We had a preprint out in January and got quite a bit of press because it does mention a little bit about Zone Zero, so you can imagine how that was kind of hot topic. But this is a project that I've been working on since before I moved from Maryland, which is 5 years. It's probably 9 years since its inception. Really ties back to the beginning of the DINS data becoming available from CAL FIRE. But let me back up before I get into the study and talk about the WUI problem, which I don't think we need an introduction to this group. Obviously, we have a lot of different fire problems in California. We have problems across our ecosystems and forests, but we also have the really devastating problems that it's destroying our communities. And you can see on the right that there's been a drastic increase over time of these very large scale, incredibly high loss fires. And that's in particular what we're focused on today. Palisades, Eaton Fire are dramatic examples. We submitted the first draft of this paper like a day or two before the Palisades fire. We didn't know it was going to happen. It was, we weren't that predictive, but this manuscript has been in work for time, and that's the reason why we don't talk about those. But it just goes to say how this is a continuing problem, and we're just waiting for the next confluence of fire, weather, and fuel and variables to all be there for the next disaster. Now, what I'm going to talk today is about modeling WUI fires, and it's a huge challenge. I'll talk a little bit about our model, and I'll talk about the data-driven approach used in this study and how we're trying to help develop tools along with others to help fix this problem and give more actionable insights that are quantifiable. But I have to do a quick pitch on the Berkeley Fire Research Lab. This is my shameless plug. We are at UC Berkeley. We have a whole team devoted to fire modeling. We focus more on physics-based tools that are used to simulate fires, not necessarily 3D-based tools, which are great, but pretty slow in real life, but more landscape scale so we can simulate WUI fires and wildland together. We also use AI and machine learning tools to enhance those simulations. We also do experimental research. There's some photos from the laboratory and the stacks in the back of our lab group. We also do a lot on emissions. And this is just an example. We were at the IBHS burns for the last year where we were doing structure-to-structure spreads. So we have data from the very tiny scale in the laboratory up to very large scale in the field, as well as trying to simulate phenomena. So we kind of span the breadth, but we try to focus on the physics of all these problems. Now, what is the physics? What is it we're trying to work on? Well, I like to say, well, we have wildland-urban interface and just narrow it to the simplest of three pathways to fire spread. And the first being radiation. So this is the way in which fire comes from a wildfire into a community or in a community to other structures. And radiation was originally thought to be responsible for most or all ignitions until really Jack Cohen did his research and started to spread the notion of embers being so important. Now, radiation is still important. And if you have a structure close to another structure or close to a large fire, radiation, but also convection, right? If you have a wind driven, you may have those flames touching the structure, but this is directly from the large flames, either radiation or direct convection that's going to be governed by the separation distance between the flames and the structure. Now, direct flame contact is really defined as the small scale ignitions. So fences are notoriously been found, like the Waldo Canyon fire and some others, to spread fires through mulch and get up to a house. In the Fort McMurray fire, we found this with junipers or little like gasoline bushes, right? And there's a variety of different, and cypress. And so there's a variety of ways in which fire can propagate. And it's these connected fuels is what we're calling it now. But that's the direct flame contact. Small fires up close to a structure can give a lot of heat that can overwhelm any protections. And finally, we have embers or firebrands. These are very small fires that are started by smoldering particles, typically, which land, eventually ignite, and they're everywhere in a fire. So everywhere you look, there's a blizzard, as Jack calls it, of embers. And we need to prevent their intrusion and ignition of materials near a house. So the way to mitigate this is to either reduce the exposure, less embers, less fire close to the home. We're really talking about the home ignition zone and the immediate, or to harden the structure. So hardening is talking about vents on eaves to prevent ember intrusion, or removing mulch right next to the house, enclosing your eaves, having double pane windows, having a Class A roof, all those things that prevent small flames or radiation on the siding or ember intrusion on the actual structure itself. And it's not like you can do one without the other. If there's a big fire, it can still overwhelm well-done hardening. So you want to do both together. But what have we been missing? I didn't come up with these recommendations. They've been there. I've done some research on them. But to actually get them to work, we need to quantify their effect, because as everyone here knows, and why this Fire Safe Council is here, actually doing the mitigation costs money. It takes time and resources. And then insurance and others want to give credit. So we need to quantify the impact of those mitigations or the lack of those mitigations. A lot of past analyses have been done. Folks like John Keeley and Alexander Seifert, Miranda Mockran, and others have had a lot of papers and contributed a lot of knowledge. But there's still some things missing. There's not a lot of quantitative data ranking one mitigation measure versus another beyond individual fires. The analysis of losses often uses linear correlations or statistics. There's a few that use these machine learning approaches that came out while we were finishing this paper. But then they're still on individual fires, but none of them have exposure data. No one is there measuring exposure data. And that's really important. A house that's exposed to a giant fire versus a house that has almost no exposure is going to have a different response. So what we tried to do is to address all of that and create a big database that we can work with for analysis and model validation. We started with a WUI data set from the damage inspection program CAL FIRE. As I mentioned, this goes back, I think, to 2014 at an NFPA committee meeting, which I was at, working with some folks at CAL FIRE as they were doing the DINS data. NIST was helping them as they set up some of the parameters to collect and trying to get a hold of that data, and as they improve the processes over time. And really, it's just an amazing resource. Unfortunately, we have so many home losses in California, but to actually have on-the-ground data following a fire of every structure that was burned, and as time has gone on, every structure that didn't burn, that might have been exposed. And that's a really valuable comparison point. And what we want to do is get exposure. And to do that, we modeled the fires after the fact to understand what was the ember and the fire flux that we expected to occur. And then we took lots of different remotely sensed data to do things like defensible space analysis. And to do this, we picked 5 fires that were in different regions, different sizes, to get a breadth out of the DINS data. It's a very large percentage of the total damage. But rather than doing every fire, we did smaller so that we could actually verify and clean up all the data to have the best refined data possible, because that's very important for data analysis. And then we use something called SHAP. It's a Shapley additive parameter. So basically, this is a way for us to do a feature importance and see what is most important here. And then we say, well, what would have happened if we did do the mitigation? How could that have changed? And so those are the results that we're going to get at the end. But let me walk you through the data and how we did it. So this is the damage inspection data. You can see all the fires that occurred across California during the collection period, and where we grabbed some of those fires, like the Thomas Fire, the Tubbs Kincaid Glass Fire, and the Camp Fire. And you can see the homes that are damaged, not damaged, and destroyed. So we do have Southern California, Northern California. It's a little more weighted on Northern California, but we do have a good spread with Southern California. We picked these fires judiciously where we had good data, good modeling, and really were able to make comparisons. So we had to put a lot of data together, starting with DINS, which is the structure inspections. And it has things like the roof, siding, windows, vent, eaves, fences, the year built. Some of that data was missing, and some of that data was then filled in. So we either had to clean up manually by getting that data from other remote sensing or on the ground or permit sources, or we'd use nearest neighbor and other methods. If, for instance, the whole neighborhood is around the same year built, then it would make sense that the rest of them are similarly built. The missing data that we had to fill in also included defensible space. For Sonoma County, we had great LiDAR data down to 1 meter resolution, and we supplemented where that wasn't available and compared to make sure that worked with aerial and street view imagery that was even finer resolution. We looked at structure separation from every structure with the Microsoft Structure Footprint database. And we reconstructed past fires, and I'll talk a little bit about how we did urban spread and the new things we do there too, to get intensity or flame length, basically, and the ember cast. And then we had to look at undamaged structures. Now there's a much better job done of collecting undamaged structures, but in some early fires, not as much. And we had to then rely on what was available from imagery to collect data on past homes, which is a lot of manual work, but we were able to verify that by comparing and making sure that the data meshed with what was collected. And then, of course, the meshing is basically the validation and ground truth. We pull some of the data aside to just basically make sure that all the methods validate and work. So one question, obviously, of course, on defensible space. It's very important next to the home. We actually, because we get down to 1 meter data, we could separate zone 0, which is the first 5 feet, zone 1 within 30 feet, and zone 2 within 100 feet. When we started this, we didn't, I think a couple years ago, we first set up the study and we're working on it. We didn't even have that zone 0 designation. We changed what it was called over time. But we did look at that first 5 feet because it is a very important region. And it's always been noted to be the closest to the home and would have the highest fire exposure. So you can see an example of a structure that was noted with no defensible space. You can see clear vegetation around, and one with clear defensible space. Now, of course, it is not perfect, and none of this is without being perfectly on the ground, but we're talking about a very large database of tens of thousands of structures, and they're very clear distinctions and a lot of manual verification. Now, the separation distance, so to do this defensible space, we calculate what is vegetation present and not. So we don't look at like mulch or ground cover because that's not available information. We just look for the presence of vegetation that has height. And you can see the vegetation mapped on the right-hand side, and where that is, that's using the LiDAR data. And you can see where that vegetation is then up to the house, and we calculate how close it is. Is it within 5 feet? Is it within 30? We also do spacing between structures using these footprints on the left, and the script can help us analyze the distance to the nearest structure. So exposure is a little tricky. We have vegetation, weather, topography from the past event. We have our model for fire spread. And if we were to do a wildland fire model, let's say for the campfire, it would look like this. Paradise is an urban area, even though it has a lot of conifers in that urban area, and it would come out and not burn. And that is a huge problem if you're trying to reconstruct a fire. So there are current limitations for Farsight or any other off-the-shelf modeling tools that they don't include urban fire spread. So we created a new framework, the Wildland Urban Extension. And the reason this is an extension is because it is not a standalone fire model. I thought it was very important that we incorporate this into existing wildland fire spread models so we can use it within existing frameworks. And it's basically all these submodels required to have wildland urban interface spread. So we keep all of the same wildland fire models. It's just that we add to that modeling tool spread through structures. And you can just see a description here of how we do that. We have that spread through structure from firebrand, from radiation, and from direct flame contact, from a wildland fire, to structures, from a structure to another structure, from a structure to the wildland. That's very important. So if we get an area that's very distributed, we can have that hopscotch from a structure to this, to this, to this. And we're constantly working on improvements to that model. And everything, by the way, is public and open source. So if you go to the Elm Fire GitHub, there is a branch for the Wildland Urban Interface model, and you can go through and see our latest work. And we continuously publish new updates to that and are working on user guides and things. So that's out there. One warning, it's written in Fortran. So it helps us run it fast on supercomputers and do things like risk analysis, but the front end will come with time. So what does that do? Here's a reconstruction. This is the time of arrival. Now, everything we do is ensemble based because there is incredible uncertainty with any fire. So this is actually pretty reasonable. There's a little bit of north spread, which is a little bit off. There could have been suppression. There could be something off with the fuel, off with the weather. But otherwise, the fire matches fairly well. It stops around where it actually stopped. And we can get both fire exposure and ember to those structures within the perimeter. Now, we have that data, but now we need to extract significance. These features are all interrelated. So that's why we don't use the linear statistical methods, because you can have a house with all these things, but your neighbor's house has a big fire and negates those effects. So you need a nonlinear influence of all the particular factors that are interrelated. So the first thing we do is we fit the data to a machine learning model using regression and classification methods. Once we do that, we extract the importance of individual features. So typically, feature importance is used to decide which features are most important to use in the model and throw out others. And we did that process too. But we also just look at the final determination because it's still important to just see which features are most important to the model. Before we can do that, as I mentioned earlier, we have to clean or pre-process the data. Other folks have used DINS data before, and there's a common complaint that, I mean, this is from firefighters on the ground, things are still smoldering. It's not perfect. And the newer data is actually much better than some of the older data because the methods are continuously improving. But still, there's imperfections everywhere. So we use things like imputation. We had to standardize and encode categorical variables and do a lot of cleanup. So this, by the way, data set for those 5 fires is also on GitHub. It's posted and open, so you can see the original DINS data, the scripts that were used, and the clean data. But we tried to do it in a standardized process that ensured the most accuracy while still making it cleaned and basically standardized so that a machine learning model could open this and interpret the data. So we used 4 models and basically used the best fit. So we did a linear logistic regression, which wasn't that great. We knew it wouldn't be that great, but we wanted to compare to existing methods. And we compared that to random forest methods, gradient boosting, and cat boost. We wound up finding that the XG boost showed the best results in overall accuracy, about 82% accuracy in predicting the correct homes that were destroyed. And that's the one we ultimately used for our model. There are many others tried with other variations. There's slight differences, but we won't get into those here. We also extracted the feature contributions, as I mentioned, which is going to be the next plot. And the shapely additive explanation, it's a very interesting method, which uses a sort of game theory to run through the model that's created, this data model. And it's basically telling you which parameter is most important in the model, what is most sensitive. And looking at all those fires together, the structure separation is the most sensitive, important parameter, which isn't surprising. All of the fires we're looking at are big, large loss fires. If we only chose to look at very small fires with very small number of losses that are out in the mountains, it would probably be very different. But we're looking at the whole data set, which primarily consists of very large losses that include neighborhoods. So they're going to have to be densely situated in order for them to have been lost. The next parameter, which is really interesting, is siding. There's probably a lot of differences in siding between whether it's wood siding, flammable, non-flammable. Sometimes I wish there was more detail to the description of the materials that were used, but within our data that was available, basically this goes to exterior siding and also year built. And year built, as we call it, is a confounding variable because it's interrelated, right? Different year built may mean there was different siding, different roof, the codes were applicable after 2008 or not. But then even if the codes and all the things are there, a structure built in the 20s and in 2000 are just fundamentally different. And the level of maintenance, the level of gaps, the way vents were, there are other things that aren't measured. Now, if we had a very detailed architectural survey, we could probably incorporate that. But without that, I still think year built becomes very important. And so even though it's confounding, we still include it. Flame length is the output from our model. So you can see that there's still an important aspect of exposure, but unlike earthquakes or other disasters, floods and wind, it's not the wind speed, it's not the Richter scale that's most important to predict damage. Properties of your house and your neighbors actually matter more. And if we say structure separation, in some ways it's saying your neighbor matters more than the actual fire getting close to your house. We also see embers being important. It's not the most important because almost every home, exposed or not, is within the ember cast, right? So ember cast can go quite far. Some of it's just probability, whether you happen to have something susceptible to ignite. And then we see the roof construction, vent screen, vegetation, window pane, and eaves pop up here. Now, I would say about roof construction, I still think that having a cedar, shake, wood roof is probably the worst thing that you can possibly have for a structure. But there are so few that I think the majority of roof construction that's non-conforming isn't that has. I mean, there are a few wood shake roofs that burn down in these fires, but they're very small, so that doesn't give a very strong signal to this data. And I just note, I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but you can go through each individual fire and see how, for instance, the tub fire, you see some more importance on the flame length, because some homes, there's a real distinction between one neighborhood where the fire gets up close with the vegetation and another. And the Thomas fire was more uniform, in which the structures were exposed and separation remains the most. There's flame length is also a part there. So you can see there's a very strong similarity, but slight differences between each fire. Now, the last thing we do, I think, is one of the most interesting. And then we came up, once we built this machine learning model, the question we all have is, what if we actually applied this mitigation? What would the impact be if we had another fire, or if we had the same fire? And so since we have a machine learning model with an 82% accuracy, we can basically reprogram or repartition the input data to have some of those features already done, run it through the model, and see what the output would be. So it's an interesting sort of flip on the problem. And this allows us to see the potential influence of different mitigation strategies. So what we're looking at on the left-hand side is the percentage of structures out of the total data set that were destroyed. So in the very bottom, we start with no mitigation, 80% of the structures in the data set destroyed, and 20% are surviving that we're looking at here. Now, if we apply hardening, we see a 5% increase on survival, which is good, but it's not that good. And it's not to say that hardening is ineffective. It's to say that hardening without other measures is not super effective alone. When we add zone 0 and only zone 0, it's kind of interesting. We now jump from the original 20% to 37% of structures surviving. That is a huge jump. And I didn't expect zone 0 to jump out so much. In fact, in the original paper, we didn't pull out zone 0 separately in the main paper. We originally did this in the supplementary material, and it was all written in the tables. But when we actually pulled it out, actually, zone 0 was really quite effective, and it's come up so much in debate that it's interesting. But when you think about it, it makes sense. This is looking at large-scale vegetation, so it's looking at least a meter high and seeing that there's things there. And if there's material to burn, it can easily overpower other hardening measures. So you need those in conjunction to get the full benefit. So then you see hardening plus zone 0, and hardening in zone 0 and zone 1. We get up to about from 20% starting to 48% survival. Now, some important caveats on this. One, we assume the entire data set, the whole neighborhood, is hardened or zone 0. So the whole neighborhood has this. If you do it for just an individual home, the effect is really minimal unless there's nothing around it, right? And that kind of makes sense. We think of a home, and we think of like kind of having a moat around it. We're trying to prevent the fire from getting up there. That's our defensible space. Then we have the embers, and we kind of need to have the walls and prevent the embers from getting in. But the problem is if we break any of those, the other factor is still going to get in. And so we see that the conjunction really benefits a lot. But if your neighbor is there within that region, your neighbor is breaking that. And in a lot of neighborhoods, especially here in the East Bay, we see that homes are very close together. And that means a neighborhood-wide, or at least block-by-block-wide approach is important. This doesn't include dynamic effects. This is just data-driven on the specific event. So it's very important to say this is not a maximum benefit either. This is saying, if we just apply it here, there's no change in the exposure. We're still assuming the same fire and ember exposure. We're not assuming that the prevented ignitions reduce exposure later on. This is something we approach with our modeling work. It's something that's ongoing, and we hope to have more work coming, like optimized way to apply mitigation, where best and how, and that's coming with time. So what did we conclude from this study? I think we saw the structure separation distance is by far one of the most important factors, and that's nothing new, right? Fire spread in the WUI often depends on building arrangement. Once a fire gets in, it's going to spread through the cluster when the flames can reach neighboring buildings or ignite them via radiation, and it's going to continue propagating. Embers are going to pop it across blocks and through neighborhoods until there's enough hardening to stop the fire spread. And the exposure from flame length and ember exposure is important. It is in there, but it is not solely important. So I want to make sure that when you look at the data, you don't think that building features like vents, siding, fences, decks, the home hardening, it is very important. You saw that it was an important parameter, right? Siding pops up as one of the most important on the feature importance. Why do you see a difference when we actually apply it? Because when we actually apply it, we see the actual spacings, the actual exposures from real communities. But if we look at the equations that are developed from the data, hardening plays a big role. And if you start to have that spacing or you start removing vegetation, then hardening will become the most important. And so it's really important to break every pathway to prevent ignition. The embers from the neighboring structures with radiation and from the direct flame contact. The defensible space, and especially zone 0, play a crucial role in mitigation. Zone 0 much more than the successive zones. So I think that's very important. Again, it's not an on-the-ground analysis, but it makes sense because we do have a lot of experiments on the ground from places like NIST and places like IBHS that have done these experiments demonstrating spread from a zone 0 to a structure. We also have had a lot of post-fire investigations that see similar behavior. And then year built, this is still a problem. There's no way to separate the year that was built until we have more data on the ground. So I think that the machine learning approach will be very useful for some predictions. It's not going to actually model the fire spread, but it can be useful for broader and, if you want a quick numbers of what's going to be destroyed and broader information, what's most important, and helps you a lot with that. I still think actually modeling the fire moving through under specific weather, terrain, fuel types, and structures is very important because it will really vary for each community, and it should be undertaken in that way. And finally, that's where the new wildland urban extension model and other similar models that are out there are important. I'm hoping that this becomes more and more used for community resilience and planning and choosing what mitigation measures to do. And we're trying to create a framework for that. We're also working on projects to have new validation and verification procedures to make sure you know the model is actually trustworthy. And as this all comes together, we hope it will really just accelerate that push to doing mitigation and making it less expensive and easier to really prioritize to where it needs to be done. Thank you.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Michael. Really appreciate it. And then thank you to the other co-study partners and fellow researchers that were part of your team, right? It does take a village. I know that some of your postdoc students were involved in this research too as well. And I found it most fascinating. So I'm very glad. And, I've got a handful, maybe 6 or so questions that I've seen in the chat so far, 7 if I count the 2 new ones that are coming in. So if you're okay, we've got a few minutes. Let's get going on a couple of these. We'll start with one. I happen to know this particular questioner. Her name is Laura Blau. She serves with me on the state Fire Safe Council Board of Directors. I think she's also the former fire marshal of Orange County. But her question is, do you think that the ranking relative to roofs would be different if the study did use California data where most roofs are Class A?
Yes. I still think, again, I think our knowledge about what works in a wildfire comes from physically what should work, what we've done in the lab, but really the large-scale experiments that have been done at places like NIST and IBHS compared with on-the-ground investigations of post-fires. What we're doing here is what I would say is the population level study. So if you see a new medicine come out, you say someone says, I think this mechanism might work. And then we tested this with rats, we tested it with a few people, and then, wow, we gave it to thousands of people, and this is what happened. So this is the thousands of people large one. If we have no one that has those old wood shake roofs, or we have very few, it's hard to see much signal. But if you look back, like let's say the 91 tunnel fire, you know that the cedar shingle roofs were a major driver. Most of these fires are under high wind. So I think it's just that we have removed the prevalence of them, and this data is collected in modern times. Instead, we're seeing other, almost Class A, but not quite Class A roofs that have gaps, don't have like bird stops, things like that are contributors, and they're not as hazardous as the wood shake shingles.
I appreciate that detail, Michael. Thank you. I have another question from Harold Schoppelman, and that question is, what about the use of fire retardants used on the structure and vegetation?
So let's start here. I think just like, well, it's not like just like in the structure, but I would say passive fire protection measures are most important. There isn't always someone there. Things aren't always working. So it's very important to have things like the hardening and defensible space to prevent the fire spread. Then you start talking about other things. You start talking about spraying fire retardants just before, long-lasting fire retardants, or you talk about even sprinklers. There is no good data to support their uses yet. That's not to say nothing has no benefit, but there's really no standardized test methods and verified reports, and we've gone through everything. It's not there yet. Everything should depend on the passive measures that we know and that work first and foremost. Foams have been found to be problematic. They blow off. Gel fire retardants start to dry after some period. They have to be applied in a certain time. There are other fire retardant formulations that might last a bit longer. There isn't really good large-scale data. I also want to caution anyone who sees experiments in those videos of like a blowtorch or this fire, the exposures you get, because we've been doing this, when you burn a whole house next to another house and you blow 50-mile-an-hour winds, which we can only go to about 55 mile an hour before it becomes unsafe, those exposures are extreme, over 100 kilowatts per meter squared, and sometimes. That is different than what you can create in a laboratory. It's for a different length, a different duration, different modes. And so I think you really do eventually need to scale up to larger scale testing. And you need to understand the mechanisms of which the fire retardants are being effective. So something is the point to prevent embers from catching on this, then there better be some ember testing. I've never seen that, like ember testing on decks for different formulations. It's going to be different than radiant heating. So I think there's still a lot of open questions. And I just encourage anyone that's looking at these companies to make sure that they do the stuff we know, the hardening and the defensible space first, and think of everything else as icing on the cake, knowing that there's still a lot of ongoing work and open questions.
Appreciate that, Michael. Here's one that I think I know I get with some regularity when I'm out visiting homes. And this question is from Ron Ryder. Do rooftop sprinklers work?
Same answer. I don't think we have great data. There's been anecdotal reports of structures that survived. There have been unpublished anecdotal reports of structures that didn't survive. How much is due to the fact that someone actually did the hardening and defensible space that they needed to do? How much is due to the fact that someone was there to turn on the sprinkler and watch and put out spot fires? It's really hard to correct for that data, and I think ultimately large-scale testing will be necessary to work out the kinks. There was a study in Australia that was very interesting. I was on a thesis committee. The impact of the wind, and this wasn't even going to the 70-mile-an-hour plus wind that we have, can blow and do crazy things. Those winds will change the application. You still need screens over your vents. You still need, I think the spray is designed to wet embers. It's the same reason why we know if a person on the ground is there, that's the biggest impact of a structure surviving, because you can put out all those little spot fires with a hose if you're there right away. It's also dangerous because if you lose it, then you lose your life. And that, we don't advocate for that. But in a sprinkler, if there's one area not exposed, you still can lose the house. So we need to test and really understand what the right approach is there.
I appreciate that answer. Thank you. We've got time for a few more questions, and I'll take one from, I think I'm saying this properly, Annette McCoubry. And Annette asks, what measures are included in hardening? Does wood siding need to be replaced? to achieve the effect shown?
Yeah, we talk about hardening, including fire resistant siding. So we don't, I'm not aware of great studies of wood siding outside of the lab that are showing failure modes, but I have real concerns for wood shake shingles. We know they fail on roofs. I don't think they're good on the side. It depends on your exposure, depends on what you're preventing, but if your neighbor or anything else is nearby, I'd be very concerned of the wood siding as being one of the pathways that fire can get in.
Appreciate that one. Here's one from Barbara Kay, and she asks, do you have analysis of the distance between buildings and the fire impact to show the risk according to distance?
We don't break down the risk according to distance in that way. In theory, some of that's within the model, but you can see from the data that clearly being closer significantly increases risk. From the structure separation experiments at IBHS, and I think they recently posted a video interview with Faraz Hedayati, who was the chief scientist there working on those experiments. At 40 feet to a Class A building, we saw pretty good survivability. 30 feet with, so long as things are built well, it had a good chance of surviving as well. 20 feet, there was an impact. So having the Class A, having not just Class A, having Chapter 7A construction definitely had an impact. Some losses still occurred under worst case conditions. Remember, not every house is going to get 55-mile-an-hour winds perfectly in the direction of your house from one to another. It's really, in a worst case scenario, it still could be lost at 20 feet. And at 10 feet, the effect of the building materials was not as much. So what does that mean for a community? That means your whole block is now at ignition risk. So you want to make sure that the whole block makes it really unlikely to ignite, because once one of the houses ignite, there's a good chance it will spread to the others if the wind's blowing in the right direction at the right time. So those things may not all come together. There's still a good reason to do the mitigation work, because you don't want anything on that block to ignite, but then it becomes this clustered approach.
Appreciate that. So we've got time, I think, for maybe 3 more questions. We'll see how we go. And then, Michael, I want to let you get on your way. I think you've got some young minds to shape or more work to do in the lab. So I appreciate this. I hope I'm saying the gentleman's name right. It's Daniel Lanaru. And Daniel asks, why do you think this type of mitigation benefit data not better or more accurately incorporated into the insurance company's discounts so as to incentivize homeowners to implement these methods at scale?
I think we're seeing this stuff happening. I think Commissioner Laura, I was on 2 committees with the Department of Insurance over the last 2 years. And they're moving that. They're starting to require measures like these to be incorporated into scores. It's really difficult because your neighbor's work, then impacts you. But I can say for at least one insurance company, unnamed, and talking to the CEO, they're giving benefit discounts that are greater than the effect of some measures. Why? Because they know that if everybody starts doing it, it's going to bring it down to that level. And so they're taking a little risk, saying we're going to give a little extra input to really encourage everybody to start getting the percentage out there. So I think that is moving in that direction. And the companies that sell the data to insurance, catastrophe modeling and others, are being forced to incorporate mitigation. So it's getting there. But we're still learning a lot, and we're still trying to get the data. And it's still a lot happening in this space, and a lot will continue. But it's about refining the numbers. We know what works and what's wrong. We're refining the numbers.
And I appreciate that answer, because I believe I also know that insurance CEO well, and have had some conversations, and I concur with the statements that you made if we're talking about the same person. Okay, so we're in the 7th inning stretch. We've got a couple of more questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Gentleman by the name of Chris Potter asks, in terms of quantifying the costs of home mitigations, upgrading, siding, roofs, etc., to protect from an intra-urban fire spread, are there any studies of how such costs for an entire city compare to the costs of installing warning sirens and real-time PM or wind direction sensors in the WUI. Do you know of any California counties that are investing in sirens and or sensors? And that's the question.
So not for those things specifically. First off, there was a study, I think IBHS was part of it, with it's a great group out of Montana, Headwaters Economics. They published something looking at the cost of implementing hardening. Steve Quarles did another one in the past. I think one headline was it was only like $3,000 in new construction because it's very cheap to just change some materials. In terms of retrofits, it was a little bit more expensive, but I don't think they spread it to whole communities. I'd love to see it balanced to actual cost of loss, because that would the risk and loss and really look at long-term benefits.
Yes.
In terms of sirens or PM sensors, I think those are actually more about saving lives than saving the structures. And of course, preventing spread through structures will save some lives because it'll give more time for evacuation. But they're almost two separated approaches there.
No, and I appreciate that. And by the way, both Kamiko Barrett and Steve Quarles, right from Headwaters, I will drop that study in the chat. It's an excellent study, and so it's an enticement for people to stay on after your last question, which is coming up now. But the gentleman, Chris Potter, also asked, do you know any California counties that are investing in sirens and or sensors? And I know one in particular. It's called Santa Clara County. In fact, they're working and partnering with the Santa Clara County Fire Safe Council, and we're going to be deploying. We already got about 50 sensors installed in the county, and we're going to be installing another 15 in the county parks, throughout county parks, as part of our contract with the county of Santa Clara. Last question, Michael, and I appreciate your courtesy and your time. This one comes from a gentleman by the name of Rick Parfett. Rick asks if you could add up the loss of all structures from all of California's major wildfires, what percentage of those structure losses could be simply avoided if they have not been in close proximity to another structure? So interesting question with probably a multitude of responses.
Yeah, I mean, you could rerun the numbers and figure that out. I don't know that offhand, but it's kind of like our exercise at the end, where we were looking at a single variable and what it changed. We didn't look if we just moved it, but I just assumed it's not Sim City or Legos. We can't move structures. No one's going to agree to scoop their house over, at least not at scale. Maybe for a really historic building, but not at this scale. So instead, we looked at the things we can change on the individual home, and that's where we restricted our study. This, again, doesn't account for other thinning and other work that reduces exposure or preventing the fires from getting into the communities in the first place. There's another very important point to, if you prevent the fire from happening in the first place, that's great. So work with electric utilities or prevention programs and monitoring, that's also going to have a big impact. And I think we need to think of it holistically. There always will be an accident. There'll be a kid with a box of matches or a machine tool or something that happens. But if we just, if we had one major disaster in 5 years rather than 5, that's another big benefit. But if we want to prevent the fires from getting in our communities, we have to do the work in the communities in the end.
Well, I think that's a great statement to end it on, Michael. In the end, it really is up to all of us, right? There's no magic silver bullet here. As your study clearly points out, it's both an individual home owner and a community level neighbor to neighbor risk reduction. So we're all in this together. And I just want to say there's a lot of questions pouring in the chat. If I can capture them, I'll send them off to you. And if your leisure, maybe a grad student or an intern can answer these for us. But otherwise, really generous with your time, Michael. Really enjoyed your opportunity to engage with us. You're welcome to sign off or stay for the last 15 minutes. But I look forward to seeing you again in the near future. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And thank you, Seth, as always, for bringing these thoughtful and engaging speakers to our our council. I did want to recognize that Renee Fong from Supervisor Abekoga's office is here, Zach from Senator Cortesi's office, and I also want to do a shout out to all of our neighboring fire safe councils. We've got representatives from Bonnie Doon, El Cerrito, San Mateo, Las Cumbres, and Diablo, I believe. So thank you guys for joining us. And are there any other fire department and district reports before we move on to our other staff reports? Okay, thank you. And now I'm going to turn it over to Amanda. She is our program director and responsible for lots of exciting things that happen on the ground.
Thanks, Dee Dee. Yes, lots of exciting things. So I will keep this short today, and I'm just going to highlight a few of the kind of really exciting things. It's been a very interesting past 4 weeks. So I know Seth already talked about the State Coastal Conservancy grant to start a prescribed burn association. So I was able to, and joining me was Irene Armstrong, one of our project managers who mostly works on forest health work with our partners with the Los Gatos Creek Watershed Collaborative. She and I, actually, and Dave Manson as well, who's one of our operations managers, joined partners at the Good Fire Fair, second annual Good Fire Fair at Henry Cowell State Park the other weekend, where we were able to do a little bit of an introduction to the Prescribed Burn Association that we are coining South Bay PBA. We do not predict getting the grant for another month or two, but we wanted to take the opportunity to be able to let people know that this is around the corner, and to sign up for our newsletter and to keep watch. We also, Zaid Ortiz, our project manager, who's currently managing our home ignition zone assessment program. We've been working with the Red Cross over the past year to organize a community event. So we worked with San Jose Fire to identify a community in need that's underserved in the East Foothills. And we decided to work in the Suncrest community. So San Jose Fire, the Fire Safe Council, and Red Cross met with volunteers, and we canvassed the community. We had some signups, and we just did some really great partnering and providing home ignition zone assessments to that community. And we hope that it's a model that we can continue moving forward with in the future. And I just want to say thank you to our partners with the Red Cross and Anthony, Captain Ibarra with San Jose Fire. And then finally, last week, I attended the Central Coast Regional Prioritization Plan convening. This was organized by the California Department of Conservation and Coastal Conservancy. The State Coastal Conservancy manages the RPP program in the region. It was a really great day to meet with other RPP planners in the area, SLO, San Mateo, Diablo Fire Safe Council. It was just a great day of talking about each other's planning process, projects, and better connecting and collaborating on a regional planning level. So end of report.
I just want to say, Amanda, I know this is an abbreviated report so that we can get all staff in, but it's kind of like the iceberg, right? There's about another literally 12 to 15 other projects that you could speak of that you and your team are doing. So great work by you and the team. We've got a pretty full suite of engagements and a lot going into 2026. And so keep up the good work. Really proud of what the team is doing.
Thank you, Seth. And as Seth mentioned, it has been a very busy 4 weeks since the last board meeting, and all of that other information and projects is available in the full board report.
Yes, thank you so much, Amanda. Your reports are appreciated. They have lots of great pictures and give you a real full understanding of everything that you guys are working on. So I would encourage.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve Harrington. He's our project manager on the Forest Health.
Yeah, hi there, everyone. Yeah, for Forest Health, the second grant, we're picking up speed again on treatments. We're working to finish the West Branch up in the Stewart Ridge area. I was up there yesterday, checking in on things, and then we've also begun work on the South Branch, which covers some areas, the Wright Station, or Los Gatos Creek proper watershed on San Jose Water Company land. But yeah, made some good headway last month. Covered over 35 acres, and I think we're pretty close to that for October as well. Invoicing and all that is going along fine with CAL FIRE, which is great. We're putting in another advance request for nearly $1 million to fund a work through pickup. Basically, will be December through maybe March. Depends on how busy we are. Depends on what the weather's like. But a lot of the other planning we've been doing is around third Forest Health grant. I've working on scheduling meetings right now with the Habitat Agency, the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Authority, and some other large private landowners who may be interested in expanding our partnership, expanding our collaborative, maybe farther south. So we're working on that. That application will probably be due at the beginning of next year. We're working on getting a head start on that. I've been working with our forester consultants on possible projects. And then as Dee Dee, you mentioned earlier, Red Sky Summit planning. I think it'll be a great program. It'll be very similar for any of those who attended the legislative and media tour a year ago. We'll have a discussion around the general information on the project, but then a walking tour of our areas that we've been treating, along with a demo of the BurnBot equipment, and also we have an N5 sensor right there at the Sears Road location where we'll be doing the tour. So I think the attendees will get a lot out of it. I'm looking forward to it. Been good coordination with the BurnBot team, and we'll have our consultants attending as well from Ascent and ARC to answer any questions as well. I think I'll leave it at that. We've got just a quick word on the West Santa Clara Landscape Resilience Project PSA, WSCLRP, as the acronym sounds, is on schedule. We should be wrapping that up in March or April of next year, and we'll have a draft of that out pretty soon for our partners to take a look at. The amended PSA for San Jose Water is also on schedule to be done at the end of this year, and that amendment will include prescribed burning into their PSA. So at some point, they may be able to tackle that. I think I'll leave it there. I'm happy to answer questions or highlight anything else, but I know we're close to 3 o'clock.
Well, let me just say real quick, Stephen, that like Amanda, you've got a lot on your plate. You manage a great team, Michael, David, Rosie, Irene. And for those that don't come to our meetings regularly, this is the largest wildfire risk reduction and forest health project in Santa Clara County. It's over 2,000 acres of work that we're doing on a multi-year project. So in terms of scale, it's certainly the largest. And Stephen and I and our partners at Blue Forest and BurnBot and San Jose Water have been investigating. There's a lot more work that we can do, and we don't want to be just reliant on the potential for CAL FIRE's Forest Health Grant. So we're working on some things such as a potential WUI bond, where we could do some government-private partnership funding for specific risk reduction projects. There's a lot of work, and I just want to say thank you, Stephen, to you and the team. And if there's no other questions for Stephen, I'll turn it over to Dee Dee to take us home.
Great. Thanks, Seth.
You're welcome.
Fantastic. I think we're wrapping up in record time. And Seth, you and Stephen both brought up kind of my final parting words is collaboration. That's been the key to our success as a fire safe council, working with other fire safe councils, working with other large landowners, working with government agencies, and with the fire districts, and also with CAL FIRE, of course. So I just wanted to recognize that and thank all of you from those organizations who are here. Normally we have a roundtable, but we just don't have time for that, where anyone who has something that their agency is working on gets a chance to make an announcement. But we will have time for that in person in Saratoga next month. So please join us. I can't stress how important I think the in-person gathering is. There's just as much value in the pre-meetings and the parking lot conversations and just the back and forth conversation that we get in person. So please join us next month. That's going to be at the fire station. Here's the information, and 1:30 is the time that we meet. So thank you all, and we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh, for the record, we do have 2 board members joined late. That was Kevin Conant and Jim Wilbrink. Thank you. Thanks all.
Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you. Very good.
Thank
Take care.
you. Bye.
Thank you, team.